Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for what is the first talk of Abu Dhabi Art for 2023. Today, as you're all aware, we will be discussing the life and legacy of the pioneering artist Farideh Lashai. Before doing so, I'd like to take a few moments just to thank some of the wonderful people who've contributed in one way or another to this moment and to the exhibition that is now showing in its final week at the photography studio of Menarta Saadiyat. In November 2022, during the Abu Dhabi Art Fair, it was our great pleasure to collaborate with the Farideh Lashai estate, with one of our participating galleries at the fair, Leila Hella, whom we humbly thank, with the photography studio at Menarta Saadiyat, and with some eminent collectors based in the UAE, to bring together a solo exhibition of works by Farideh Lashai, curated by our very special speaker today, Sam Samiee. The exhibition is still on now. It's in its closing week, so please do visit if you are joining us from the UAE today. An enormous thank you is due to the generous collectors I've mentioned who've loaned works for the exhibition. And I think it's a fitting testimony to Farideh's legacy regionally and in particular here in the UAE, that we were able to bring together an entire and meaningful exhibition of significant works, all from local collections. I'd like to take this moment to sincerely and deeply thank His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan bin Khalifa, alongside, of course, the Mohammed Afghani collection, Mariam Masoudi, Farhad Bakhtiari, Mana Jalalian, and the estate of Farideh Lashai for loaning precious works for exhibition. I also thank the photography studio at Menara for collaborating with us. Farideh Lashai had a prodigious creative output that spanned writing and painting, and you'll learn much more about it now. But I'd like to highlight that the works chosen for exhibition are some of her animated paintings, linking as they do to the idea of the moving image, to the passing of time, to being conscious of the times that we're in, and to the historicizing of the past enabled by photography. So there are a lot of nice tie-ins with the exhibition taking place in a photography studio. And we also owe a debt of gratitude to Manelli, who I'm sure all of you know, who's an incredible defender of her mother's legacy, who's ensured that the research and exhibitions and collaborations that have ensued really ensure a global understanding is reached on the significance of her mother's legacy. And now, with no further ado, I turn to our speaker today, Sam, who will be sharing his insights and thoughts on Farideh Lashai. And we're extremely fortunate to have with us today because he has unique insights into the artist. He's very, very familiar with both her life and her work. And he'll be taking us on a journey that looks at her early beginnings, the making of an artist, through to her social activism and the role she felt artists had to play, and of course to the exhibition that is now on at Menarta Saadiyat and the works that he's curated together in an incredibly thoughtful and meaningful way. And I'd like to give a little bit of background on Sam before we kick off. He is, of course, a painter, a writer, a psychoanalyst in training. His primary education was at the University of Arts in Tehran. He's a jury member of some prestigious prizes, including the Dutch Royal Painting Prize and Wolverkamp Prize. And he was also the winner of these prizes in 2016 and 2018. He's a lecturer and in European and UK academies. And he's a researcher on art history, Persian poetry, and psychoanalytic theories, which he brings into his studio practice and employs painting in multiple registers. Interestingly, he's also been looking at this idea of modernism in the context of rewriting or rethinking or reframing modernism and it becoming modernisms across the world. So we're moving away from the sort of Western canon and the sort of idea of European and American modernisms and looking at what it can mean from a global South perspective and what it can mean for the region. And in that context, he's been able, from a unique position, to look at Farideh's legacy as an artist and to look at what artists from the region were confronting with the advent of modernity, both in terms of the artists she was inspired by, but also in terms of her response and and her takings from it, and the questions she asked from it through her work. And Sam, as an artist himself, also offers unique insights in looking at the innovation of her work, the techniques that she employed, and why and how they were so significant and meaningful. So we'll be able to also explore that with him. He is, of course, joining us from Rotterdam, I believe, or he will be soon, where his works are going to be included in an exhibition there. But I'm very, very grateful for him for taking the time out to share with us his thoughts in putting the exhibition at Minaret together, and in giving us more insights into this incredible artist, who we've had the fortune to be able to show at Abu Dhabi Art. A final point on the fair itself. Sam and I were discussing yesterday the importance of art fairs in being spaces where we can be quite nimble and present things much more fluidly, to perhaps traditional institutions that have a lot more sort of structures and frameworks and processes to work through to be able to put these kind of exhibitions together. As an art fair, we're able to quite swiftly bring together works from collections and present them to a diverse audience. We have 20,000 visitors last year that came and saw the exhibition, and it's a space really for that kind of discovery to happen, also for curators to really discover important artists in the space of the fair, and that's made possible by curators and artists such as Sam, who bring such a wealth of knowledge and experience and insight into the fore with artists such as Farideh Lashai. So with that, I hand over to you, Sam. For people that are here, if you've got any questions, please do note the Q&A box at the top. You're welcome to tap on that, write your comments and questions. Sam will try and answer as we go along, but most probably we'll come to those questions at the very end. And I warmly welcome you, Sam. I thank you for giving us this talk, and I'm so looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Diala. Thank you for this wonderful experience. It was an absolute pleasure and honor to curate this show. Thanks to your help and your support and your great team. That was so brilliant how this came together, and with the great generosity of the collectors, of course, who lent the works to the fair. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm also very thankful for your generous introduction. I hope that I can live up to it. I should really start with a disclaimer that I really rely on the work of great curators and art historians and artists who have worked with Farideh prior to this. And to make sense of the context that I came from, I had to take the way to think a bit curatorially, thanks to the opportunities that were given to me in the Netherlands in the first place. I try to share these slides with you right now so that I can speak from the presentation that I have prepared for today. And please let me know if it is looking fine as we start. And perfect. So as you all know, Farideh Lashai was a very influential artist in Iran, and she presented her work internationally around the globe. She worked in very different registers as a painter, and towards the later years of her career, she employed more innovative aspects of technology that she could use in art. So in this talk, I try to look at the early years of Farideh in Europe, the influences she had in Iran as an artist, in literary and translation work. I try to reach two conclusions in this talk. So I try to reveal it to you right in the beginning, so it would not be too confusing if I drift away too much. Especially in these days, a lot of people think and question the role of art in our turbulent times, especially in Iran. So, but I think Farideh Lashai stands out when we think about the paradigm that Walter Benjamin brought to us, where he thought that aestheticizing politics is something that regressive politics does. and he thought that socially conscious artists should be more politicizing aesthetics. And I tried to show how Farideh managed to do that in many different registers of her work. And these last works of her, particularly the current exhibition, that was more curated by giving a context, by employing some quotations from the book she wrote, but also by organizing the works not chronologically, but from the time frames that she was addressing in each work, showed the very great example of politicizing aesthetics. And she has been a wonderful example for many people, including myself, older generation, younger generation. She has been very innovative, and I will show that Benjaminian idea happened in her work from the technical point of view by the merger of the non-time-based art, which is abstract painting, with the time-based medium of animated video installation, video loops, using photographic images and well-known cinematic work from Charlie Chaplin or image of Kulthum. So to just give a brief introduction to the life of Farideh. Farideh was born in Gilan. It's in the northwest of Iran. It was traditionally called in Iran the Gate of Europe. It was very much westernized part of Iran. As much as it had rural landscape, it had also very much the advance of modernism, let's say. She came from a very privileged background, and this was something that she always tried to think about. How could she share those privileges with the less privileged, both in her literary work and her artistic endeavors. Just to give you an introduction, well, here you see the province where Farideh comes from. This is how it was related to Eastern Europe. Through here, they could go to St. Petersburg, Paris, different places through Baku and East Europe. This is the city center, the municipality of Rasht, where Farideh lived in the first years of her life. And this is the rural landscape of Gilan, which quite looks distinct from the rest of inner Iran. And this is also a region that a lot of Iranian artists that we know globally come from, like Ardeshir Mohasses, Bahman Mohasses, Sia Armajani. It had a lot of modern art education embedded in the middle class and upper classes. Just to give you a brief example of how Rasht looked like. Rasht was the first city that had a theater where women could also perform. It also had technology brought in from West quite early on, first television, first telephone center, as well as its very close contact with the rural life that did not necessarily have those advantages. It also had a traditionally very much relationship with India and northern India, Kashmir. You can see that in the type of give and take with Eastern Islamic realms. Farideh's early years, she went to Munich and studied translation. Translating was something that she did throughout her life. She also started writing essays. It's very fascinating that doing research for this talk, I realized that her first writing was called Meeting with Goya, that was published. And this is also the last work she did in a video installation that I show a few minutes of it at the end of the conversation, at the end of the presentation. She was very into work of Bertolt Brecht, and she translated two works of him that I have shown you here. She translated poetry from Italian and from German. She contributed a lot in newspapers and magazines, writing about the role of artists. She questioned the absence of women in the Iranian art scene. And these works were very much simple language, naturalistic way of writing that would be very accessible to a very wide audience. This really helped her write her bestseller, The Jackal Came, Shalbamo, titled in Gilaki, her native language, but written in Persian. It's an autobiographical novel that is written in essayistic form. This is an example of one of the landscapes she describes from her childhood. I woke up one morning and I felt afloat in a sea of undulating green. It's clear to you now where I get the title of the exhibition from. It was on the porch of Robabe's house. She had set up a mosquito net for me. I pushed the net aside and sat erect, filled with awe. The tip of rice grass, still green, were moving with the breeze and making me restless. The whole space was undulating. So anyone who has been to Geelong can relate to this very well. My father, coming from the same city, when I was making the show, I showed some quotations from the city, and I could see from his reaction that this really spoke to him. And this translation is from dear Sohrab. Sohrab Mahtavi has translated the book, and hopefully it will be available in English for a wider audience. I really think it would be very, very interesting for a wide audience, from young artists to professionals and art enthusiasts. Farideh, before going to Munich and to Europe, was studying under Jafar Petgar. Jafar Petgar was the second or third generation, one could say, of the artists in Iran, visual artists who employed Western modes of using representation, and they used oil color. He was very influential on a lot of artists, including Farideh. He was from Azerbaijan. He moved with his brother to Tehran. He educated a few generations of artists, and he was very influenced also by Persian literary humanism, Persian adabiyat, Persian literature. The right painting here, you see the peasant in the prison of the landlord. In many paintings, he showed really much concern with social questions that I think I have tried in the last few years of my research, showing that a lot of artists like Farideh, who aren't particularly canonized for this quality, but they took on a lot of those sensibilities from Persian literature and Persian literary humanism, and they tried to employ it in visual arts, although it wasn't very easy in the beginning. And I think we can see in the throughout life of Farideh, she really beautifully and innovatively, by understanding both West and Iranian history, brought these two together and were concluded in the exhibition that we have now in Abu Dhabi. Well, a bit about the context of those years in Tehran. Well, in '78, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art, was founded. There were a lot of artists who would not necessarily want to work in those registers as Jafar Petgar. We see Ahmad Ali here trying conceptual art. It's a self-portrait. There were coffee house painting influences on Saqqa Khane that is quite very well canonized. And some artists who completely left Iran and tried to not engage necessarily with Iranian themes or regional themes. One of those artists is Behjat Saad, that is a generation older than Farideh. Farideh really liked her work. Here, I wanted to particularly show this kinetic painting of Behjat Saad. She was also very close to literary circles. She was a friend with Furugh Farrokhzad, the famous poet, whose literature and literary innovations left a huge impact on Iranian literature, Persian literature. This kinetic painting was particularly interesting to me because of how Farideh also brings movement to this final works of her. But I think that it is Farideh among her generation that manages to merge these sensibilities from literature, from politics, from social concern, from analytic thinking and aesthetics, innovation, formalist innovations together, that would not be excluding the other interest of her. So this is a quote from her interview in 2006. she basically was very eager to say young artists should start their work by thinking. As much as you can see in her practice, impulsive movement, gestural brush strokes, color, abstraction is very key. At the same time, you see that she remains very concerned how an artist can be engaged socially. She was also a part of the collectives like Dena, that was an Iranian women artists, that this description is from Sharjah Art Foundation when they had an exhibition in 2000, early 2000, I think. And the group had some younger and same generation artists like Farideh, Shahla Habibi, Rana Farnood, Masume Mozaffari, Farah Usuli, to name a few. I was also very interested to show this one pamphlet from the exhibition she had in Khuzestan. My dear friend Mahnaz Yousefzadeh, who was in Abu Dhabi in conversation with me, reminded me of the show that she had on the northern shores of the Gulf and the advent of the oil economy that in 70s in Iran was very, excuse me, do I still say, in 77, this exhibition happened in the cultural center of the National Iranian Oil Company. It's very interesting. She was also one of the first artists from Iran after the revolution who understood how important it is to be present in Dubai, in UAE. Her very major exhibition at Sharjah Art Foundation was also another moment where we could see that her presence globally many times was through her presentation in UAE. So you see here the invitation. It mentions Farideh's education in design. She was working at Rosenthal, and she also designed some ceramic. She did crystal painting, and this design, along with translation, literary work, theater, the political condition of those years in Iran, really were very strong influences on her. I'm now showing you some paintings after Farideh's mother's passing. So Farideh went to the US, came back to Iran during the war years in the 80s. These paintings are after 80s, after the war. You see, probably these were very enigmatic to me. Why horse? I still have no answer to that. But it's very interesting. I think it's really speaking to very different aspects of her earlier and later works. These are some landscapes more from late 80s. She's growing out of that. She's graduating from those horse years. And then in 2000, as well as the war years, she did a lot of abstract work. I was 14 actually when on Iranian national TV I had an interview with Farideh, and what stayed with me all these years, after 20 years I still remember this, was that she mentioned that, and she mentions this in her book as well, she was really complaining about Americans not being very appreciating abstraction. Nonetheless, when the war happens, she goes back to Iran, and while bombs were showering on Tehran, she starts painting flowers, which reminds me of how Monet and Matisse dealt with war, in that violence in their decorative work that is just recently being picked up and canonized as important, as a critique of avant-garde in modernism. Pierre Bonnard, Fairfield Porter, other people who you wouldn't necessarily think are really related to the same oeuvre. Yeah, you see more works of her in 2000, 2007, quite big works. And then we have this exhibition by Mrs. Jawaharian, the retrospective in 2015, that was a major exhibition. It was very, very important. I particularly chose this screenshot from the newspaper because it talks about the hopeful 2015. And I really thought that Farideh's work is so suitable for every condition of social and political weather. She has lived through all those years, and she has answered, and she has kept a very analytic and yet engaged distance from those events. That's why I also called the exhibition Afloat Over Undulations. She did not give in to those moralist, guilt-driven seductions. She thought history very thoroughly. She understood West, she understood modernism, she understood Iranian history, Persian literature, the region very well. And this exhibition, along the other retrospective, really showed the very, very diverse practice of Farideh. This is a photo from the Sharjah Art Foundation in 2016, the retrospective that happened in UAE. This is an example of Farideh's work presented in Madrid in 2019. Some of the works are shared work as the current exhibition. So as Dyala mentioned, and I mentioned in the very beginning, the backdrop of my research, within which Farideh's work is very featured figure, is to think about, I understand that institutional and art historical work are slow, but as a young artist, I really had to hurry up and understand how is it that I can leave Iran and have influences of people like Farideh Lashai on my education and go to Europe and still engage with conversations with artists from the rest of the world. And I think that people like Etel Adnan, Farideh Lashai, Siar Majani, Nasrin Mohammadi, from different generations, yet with engagement with global trends of modernism and at the same time understanding their own local cultures, engaged very well and came up with very innovative, very fascinating mode of working with the making of global modernism. The type of describing, the name I chose to describe this group of artists in Persian world was visual adab, that I try to tell you a bit more in the next slides. It's more thinking about 19th and 20th century reception of Western modernism by people like Kamal ul-Mulk, Jafar Petgar, Ali Asghar Petgar, and their next generation like Farideh Lashai, Siar Majani. And I think they all, what is shared between all these artists is that they are really conscious of the importance of historical thinking. And I really rely on the work of Robert Lindsay, Beyond Resemblance, and the work of Siamak Delzende, who himself relies heavily on the scholarship of Leila Diba, on the curatorial work of people who worked on Farideh's work before that, on 19th and 20th century, and on non-art historical work like Abbas Amanat, Manakia, I show you a few more names. This has been my my research on adab. Adab in Iranica Encyclopedia is defined as a term that is education, culture, good behavior, politeness, proper demeanor. Therefore, it is a concept that is very closely related to the concept of ethics. So it is, in a way, ethics and aesthetics at the same time. That's why I chose this word. And I got this from Hamid Dabashi's The World of Persian Literary Humanism, which is his translation of adab into English. And I think it might be interesting for those people who are into scholarly work that I did on this to take a look at the Field Meeting Take 6 Adab Collection Within Chaos. I'm not going to open this up too much, but I have really relied on the work of Manakia, Armando Salvatore, Setrag Manoukian, Hamid Dabashi, among many other art historians and scholars. I try to go to the next. And these are examples from Siar Majani and Etel Adnan. I think their work are also showing how they're really speaking to a wider global modernism This exhibition of Etel Adnan is in 2003 in Munich. It was a major exhibition on her work. And this is a work of Siar Majani, who also came from Gilan, the same province as Farideh, in the same exhibition where Farideh's work was presented by the Parasol Unit Foundation at the Venice Conservatory in 2019. The Spark is You. The name of the work is Edgar Allan Poe's study. So Dr. Ardalan managed very well showing how these artists were in conversation with, you know, in a way, the World Republic of Letters, with the World Republic of modernist formalism and modernist ideas and modernist art.
Sam,
So,
if I may, I'm just going to jump in to say
yes, please.
that two things really. One is that our Q&A boxes are not working. So if people have questions, I'm worried we've missed your questions because I've just heard that the Q&A box is not working. Please put your questions under the icon that says chat at the top of your box. So if you click on chat, you can write any questions in there and we'll be able to see those. And just a quick question for you to test that out, Sam, is it was so interesting to see that you're drawing a parallel between Farideh and Etel, both in terms of their output, you know, crossing, you know, writing and painting and contributing. Could you tell us, to society at large, to the societies they were in, could you tell us a little bit more, maybe draw a bit of a parallel between those two artists and in relation to modernism in our part of the world and how we can think about that?
Absolutely. I'm very glad you asked this question. I go back to this slide. I think, well, you know, I think, as I say, there are better people to talk about this, but in an urgent mode of needing to locate myself and my education and my peers, we had to think about these questions of, is it only that we are copying the Western world, or is it that modernism was a global enterprise? I think there are scholars not in art history, but in global history departments that are moving away from national history, namely Sanjay Subramaniam. He shows really beautifully how modernism is something that in the 16th, 17th century was a question in Delhi, in Istanbul, in Isfahan, as much as it was a question in London, in Paris. Many scholars have shown this in Northern African art history. As you were mentioning to me, you might know better, you might want to say a few words about that as well, about the Egyptian surrealism. I think Etel Adnan was really an example of how her influence went beyond merely saying she was an American Lebanese artist. She was really, if you look at the traces of her description of her time in Berlin, her time in Istanbul, her writing, she has magnificent literature, poetry, autobiography. That is, I would love to see the work of Farideh Lashai translated into English, so there would be a chance to compare these two on a literary level, and then look at the visual work that is, as Robert Lindsay puts it, is not bound with national identity. I think Etel Adnan and Nasrin Mohammadi are and Farideh Lashai, these three are always, to me, women who go against all cliches that we think about post-Ottoman countries, Persia and India. You know, there can, I mean, it deserves its own lecture, and I wish that this talk would intrigue a sense of curiosity, so that people would start imagining that the modernism that we know deserves to be rewritten by including artists from Latin America, from Japan, from India. And their questions are really about frame, form, color, composition. Just to name a few things that are, you know, keywords for talking about abstraction, abstract painting. I think the influence of Europe, Northern Italy, abstract, trends post-war, or Dutch Cobra, Dutch Copenhagen, Brussels, Amsterdam, Cobra influence on them is very clear. We can see Cairo, Istanbul, Beirut quite very clear in the 60s, 70s, 80s, as well as one can say the same for Iran, for Tehran, for Gilan, the influence of Azerbaijan and Gilan, the influences they got from from Caucasia, from Eastern Europe, from Poland, from Polish immigrants, from Georgian immigrants, and the conversations they had through trade. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to open it too much, but I thought that indeed, I really love to. I have been in conversation with a lot of different curators who are way more professional than me in the Netherlands, especially. That I really like to see an exhibition where we see the work of Etel Adnan and Farideh Lashai and Paul Thek and Brian Geisen and their fascination with the Islamicate. I think the conversations that I had with Lisa Ahmadi at Asia Society Contemporary Art Forum very much revolved around this, and she put it beautifully how one can easily say making of London wasn't only the British people, it was really a world affair. But I don't know if it satisfies your question, if I should go further, or should I?
No, I think you've enticed enough people that hopefully build on that idea, and I hope to see an exhibition come out of it afterwards. We have a lot of great people attending, so let's see. Thank you for answering
thank you for the question, and I think it's indeed the visionary works that you do in UAE, and there are a lot of interesting work that is being done. It's slow, it's very slow, so probably my work or the claims that I do make here are a bit outrageous to people who are more used to academic slow process of reviewing and testing and checking and putting to discussion. But maybe my artistic license allows me to do such provocations a bit. So I try to not go too far. But I think the exhibition that dear Ziba did in the Parasol unit, looking at the 200 years anniversary of the publication of West Aslische Divan by Goethe, that was a dedication to Hafiz of 14th century, showed that example, how our region has also been contributing to the global conversation, and we're not merely always copying. It's more and more known now how Picasso and modernists were influenced by Northern African, Moroccan artists, or women were doing abstract painting before men. It's just that it takes time to canonize and to change the narrative. So as an educator, I've been trying to do my bit. I'm more than happy to follow up on this conversation in the Q&A. So I want to concentrate in the time that is left on the works that are in the exhibition at the Manarat al-Saadiyat. So as I said, Benjamin says that aestheticizing politics is quite very regressive in political thinking, but politicizing aesthetics would be the way out. And I chose to show the work of Farideh with and without the projection of the video animation onto the abstract painting. It's quite very groundbreaking work to reach to a moment where you have finished your painting, and the painting in its own right is a beautiful, intriguing, abstract work. And then you still bring this lightness of Al-Amal, the singing, that is very well known to the audience in UAE, and Chaplin's playing with this globe, the desire, and all that it brings in for us. I very much love also the work of gravity on the earring of Kulthum. I showed the rest of these works and then try to make my conclusion on the technicality, the innovation in technicality by Farideh, which I think goes beyond and above the work of Farideh, the regional limits and identity, as well as the content. I think it's something for the younger artists to think about. And I think this is what I was mentioning to you. We might see this is happening in the work of very, very younger people. My very dear friend Agnieszka Polska makes wonderful video projections. We have tried to be working on this combination of painting and video projection. And I have been showing Farideh to her in our conversations, as well as, I mean, one can say Ed Atkins. But in Farideh's generation, this is extraordinary, in my opinion. Prelude to Rabbit in Wonderland. So the exhibition, the entrance to the exhibition, you see El Amal as the first work. Then you go to the exhibition, and the first painting you see, the first video installation onto the painting, is the prelude to Rabbit in Wonderland, which I thought is very much corresponding with the innocent youth years of Farideh. And you see the rabbit comes in. It's not yet really signified with a particular historical event. The second work, and here is an installation shot that Diala's team kindly did brilliant documentation of. So this is the quote that I read to you in the very beginning of the presentation. Here is another quote about Mossadegh. Mossadegh, the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, who was overthrown by a coup. And to Farideh, this was a very, very tragic moment in our history. And this video installation is drawing on the last hours prior to the court the court that sentenced Dr. Mossadegh, and the rabbit visits and talks to this figure. And this visiting rabbit, this protagonist in the exhibition that goes from one frame to another, connecting these timeless painted frames, is just, I think, idiomatically reaching a new level of media innovation that I never get enough of emphasizing this. Dear, how queer is everything today? Projected animated photographic image on painting and sound. Then we have the rabbit visiting this beautiful painting with this traditional trays full of food, with a title that is, I think, the highlight of this, thinking about moralist tendencies. Keep your interior empty of food, that you mayest behold there in the light of interior, where in this case the crows are attacking the rabbit, and the rabbit is scared and scared off and runs away to this barrel, which now you see a few screenshots of the view onto the barrel. Here is the barrel that, if you look at the entrance of the exhibition, you see these three works, and I tried to put the work in a way so that it would be a pivot to the exhibition. It's a melancholic work. It's the rabbit that tries to capture the moonlight. And this is where you turn to the last work, and you see the map of Iran in the gestalt of the Cheshire cat, where all the rabbits are diversified. It's not only the rabbit of Farideh, it's all the other rabbits that are going down that rabbit hole. So the name of the work is Catching the Moon. I think it's a very melancholic subject. And in the quotations around that wall also, we try to show how the guilt-driven feeling of the Vietnam War in those years for Farideh was so intolerable. She was very angry at those artists who would resort to aesthetics, but then a few paragraphs later, she's loving them and adoring them and cherishing their work. And this oscillation, this going round and round and trying to find meaning and finding peace, and yet I think waiting for a long time, engaging with literature, engaging with translation, standing on this translating position between classes, between political positions, is really clear in this exhibition and in this Mossadegh work as a pivot, as well as this barrel. And well, the last work is here, As you see, Farideh has painted the map of Iran a few times, and this is very funny. One would imagine that an artist would become more grim and more bitter, but it's almost as if Farideh's matured works are so light-hearted and so accessible to anyone. And I love the images Maneli posted from the show where kids are so intrigued by this show. You know, when a work with so many layers is still intriguing to children, one would say, well, we say sahl mumtane in Arabic and in Persian literature, like something so difficult to reach, yet it seems so easy, you know. This is the last work of Farideh that I also wanted to show to make point about how this coming together of non-time-based work with time-based work were so successfully enunciating a field for other artists to think about this innovation in medium. The work is called When I Count, There Are Only You, but when I look, there is only a shadow. It's 99, if I am right, reworking of the disasters of war of Goya by doing the etching, but not reproducing the figures. It's just the landscapes. In an interview I read from her saying that the violent, terrible events that befell on Iran, on her country, on the world, were not enough anymore to just present one frame of those disasters. Therefore, she projected these animated pictures that when the moonlight moves onto these frames, they are animated and they appear. And if you may, I would like to present a few minutes of it, especially that it has also music on it from Chopin. And I think it's very intriguing. In Venice, when I visited the show, every time I see this show, this work, I get so emotional. And I realized they actually had to put like a Kleenex box for people leaving the room. It was quite very heavy. So yeah. So as you see, this was in Ghent in Belgium, and it was shown in a cabinet alongside with Goya. Work of Farideh and Goya spoke very well with each other. This is the final image I want to show you, and then if you may allow me, I want to finish by reading a paragraph from her book, which I think also is very beautiful. From The Jackal Came. So much violence, how do we bear it? How come compassion is rotting like a fine moth-eaten net in the soiled waterways of the city? And I carry my whimpering child on my hands. It was midnight and Parveen was leaning on me heavy, and every inch of my body was burning in an unknown tenderness in flakes. This dear body that yearns for a journey, how heavy and how filled with the love of years. I don't know what else to do. I'm now one with all those who don't know what to do in this spring midnight. Black masses that start moving with calm in the middle of the night appear like a colorless moon from afar that lets the familiar low tide settle back into sea. There was no news of anyone. I buried her by myself alone. All those relatives who filled the house whose carpets would dampen the sound of the hoofs of Bolsheviks running through its rooms, all that in the sun of Anzali port, with bright ochre houses and fine as silk sand, disappeared like smoke. It was as if the jackal had taken it all, or perhaps it was a sweet dream like the voice of Fahime Khanum, when rain was pouring on the red terracottas of Rasht.
Hello, hi, good evening.
Hurrah! Welcome, welcome, Your Excellency. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Diala. Thank you. It's been a very enjoyable discussion and a presentation from Sam. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for curating such a beautiful exhibition. It was moving, absolutely, and I loved seeing how the abstract and the video of the Kulthum and the, it's just as you said, the layers and how the Sahel Mumtana, what we say of everyone being related to it. I have to say that I love the parallel between Tel Adnan and Farideh's work, and maybe it would be great to see how can we see more of that in the future, and how can we as well have more understanding of Farida. She's just such a deep, artist, and really forward in her work. And it would be wonderful to see how can we take this forward from an education perspective, or more of an easy exhibitions, or educational literature in a way or another. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kindness. Thank you for your words, and thank you for inshallah, this will be really happening. I really wished that this exhibition would be intriguing for exactly for this kind of educational aspects. I think we are really in the beginning of understanding how hard it was for the 20th century, for people like Farideh, for people like Etel, or Nasrin, to balance an influence from the West that was so strong, and very difficult lives they might have been leading, with very much confusions. And I think we really, I believe that the educational part should be prioritized, so that it would be giving more people a chance to, as you said, understand deeper layers of them, but also to make it accessible, to digest it for a wider audience. I don't know if I will be the right person to suggest any solution for that, but I'm sure that there are very, very renowned members of the audience, professionally renowned, who know or might have some, suggestion, recommendation for to that end. And maybe Diala, do you want to say a few words about that? Or I'm sure you're more into it, more capable of thinking for ways to make this work.
Well, no, I mean, I would just reinforce the importance of looking at modernisms from the region. And, you mentioned the Egyptian surrealism, which is the amazing research done by Sam and Till that we're all familiar with in the UAE. That's the beginnings of looking at artists from the region and their response to modernity. I do think that's critical work, and it's great that a lot of it's coming from the UAE as well. I would just have a question about the exhibition that's at, Manar at the moment. You were talking about the white rabbit, and of course how that signifies innocence. It's also a reference, isn't it, to Alice in Wonderland, and sort of falling down the rabbit hole and the absurdities of life, and the white rabbit from that. And I think the white rabbit is, also relevant to the artist personally. She often referred to herself as, in her later years, as she was battling with cancer and sort of enfeebled, sometimes too tired to speak to people, she'd say, "It's not me today, it's the white rabbit," when she was speaking to people on the phone. I think that's just quite interesting. And also the crow, I think, is from Pasolini. And I can see, maybe you could just talk a little bit more about what that white rabbit signifies, or what your thoughts are on that, and of course with the white rabbit, also the idea of in the works that you mentioned, that the white rabbit occurring across the works is very innovative. It's very different because it's looking at animation across paintings, across times, and I think you also mentioned to me yesterday, when you were curating the show, you were thinking about the different times that each painting was referring to, rather than when that actual painting was made. I don't know whether you want to just say a few words about that. That's a question from me. And I encourage anyone else to post any questions in the chat room as well, if you have any.
I think it's very interesting what you say. I think the Cheshire Cat also just reinforces that we are in a landscape of Alice in Wonderland. And the brilliant thing is that there is no Alice mentioned. There is no Alice painted. There is no Alice animated by Farideh, as if she makes us the visitors, the viewers of the work, being the Alice in the room. And I think this is a very brilliant installation question she had in mind architecturally. Like, well, there is the landscape, there is the rabbit that is signifying the curiosity and the innocence, as well as her humor of referring to herself as the white rabbit. And I think, I think she really understood how these landscapes, similar to work of Goya, are so heavy. They're very difficult to bear with. And she thought that there should be something that lightens up, and it indeed lightens up, as well as animating and moving and connecting these frames that might not be very easily connectable. Like the abstract painters, we cannot connect these works of Rothko. We know how difficult it was for Rothko to keep some works together for the 4 seasons, but and all the fights and the struggles. Farideh finds such a brilliant mode of using animation, and we all know how Iranian cinema was so influential in those years. As well as, of course, northern Italy, artists from there, as well as Pasolini and also Farideh translated the work of Italian poet Ginsberg. So I think the points you mentioned, I just second that. It's probably very clear also when you're physically present in this space.
I can see Nadine Khalil, who's of course a writer and researcher on art from the region in particular. It's great to see you with us, Nadine. Also has a question. She's got her hand up.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Whether...
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Hi, Sam. First of all, I wanted to say I really loved the exhibition. As Dyala mentioned, I'm a Lebanese art critic based in Dubai. I cover the region mostly, with also this expanded sense of what the region could mean. And so I kind of really loved what you said about this idea of global modernism, because I feel the trend, especially coming from the Middle East and its surroundings, has been to argue for a more regional modernism. So it's beautiful to kind of see this more intermingled or entangled way of looking at modernism as a whole. But I was wondering, I mean, in the way that we're taught traditionally in art history, especially with regards to Lebanon, and there might be some similarities with Tehran. Obviously, we're talking about countries that were open to the West earlier, and then, with the imposition of certain regimes, we're no longer as open. Of course, that's not the case of Lebanon, but, I'm speaking in terms of, the before that was similar, let's say, in both Iran and Lebanon. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about modernisms in the East, let's say, and in the West, actually occurring at different times? Because if you look at, let's say, the start of modernism, we could say, I'm also not a historian, but we could say, let's say, Impressionism. And then we look at when, at least modernism in the Arab region has been looked at in terms of the rise of independence movements more in the 60s and onwards. So it came later. And and also there's this other aspect of modernism in that a lot of the painters and artists from the region, they went to Europe, even Saudi Arabia in the 50s, they went to Paris, they went to Italy, and then they came back.
Yes.
And with that perspective, they added something new to their own landscape that was not a mere borrowing of forms from the West, but almost a dialogue, I would say. So I feel like, yes, you added a little bit more nuance, but I think time is very important to look at, because I think the first thing that struck me with your exhibition was how much Farideh seemed ahead of her time, an avant-gardist for her time in the materials and mediums she was using. So yeah, that's my question. Just if we could look at maybe a more dialogic way of comparing the East and West in this case, and also the fact that the modernisms were not synchronous. It was almost like a feedback loop, right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your point, and it is very, very important indeed to think about, as Diala also mentioned, modernisms, I think. And I think the reception, encounters, exchanges, feedback loops, or one-way colonial movements, aggressions that were felt by particular regions. I really like this idea of terroir from Anurag Mishra, a psychoanalyst from India, who says that psychoanalysis is really a Viennese science, but it's like the grapevine that you bring to different land, and in each different land it produces a different type of grape. Therefore, different taste that when you taste the grapes, the wine, or whatever production it will bring to us, metaphorically speaking. I tried to touch a bit on it, but I really believe that it not only demands another talk, it demands a conference probably of 30, 40 people presenting on the notion of synchronicity and the particular times. So I think there are, I personally rely on the work of historians, even maybe more than art historians, to get this right, to understand what did it really mean in 1840s versus 1895 in Tehran, in Rasht, in Tabriz. You know, music, for example. When you think about music, Iranian music is so built in Beirut, but Iranian newspaper is all coming from Delhi and Cairo. And what did it mean to have print machine in Cairo and not in Tehran? What did it mean for those people to go to those particular places? So I think my understanding is very much narrowed down to artists in Iran, mostly coming to Tehran and working in Tehran, who have left to Europe. And it's a very limited time frame. As I say, I rely on the work of Siamak Delzende, Leila Al-Diba, and what we get in the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art and what we don't. But from the artistic point of view, I could see from the point of view of form and education, how the particular groups of artists like Etel Adnan could be, formalistically speaking, in conversation with their Western and non-regional equivalents or peers from Japan, from Latin America. Like my friend Vivian Zero introduced the work of Juan Davila from Chile, who went to Australia. So I think we are really in the beginning of that question. And I think you have the very, very important point of modernism is not experienced everywhere the same way. And it is not responded to in each of those places in the same way. It really, I think it's a work to be addressed by fields wider than art history. And I think the field is shifting little by little. When we look at as also Diala mentioned in the very beginning, I learned this from Stephanie Bailey, where we look at the World Great Exhibition from 1812 until Art Fairs, major fair production changed from being a nationalist, imperialistic mode to a more secular, capitalistically maybe driven, bringing so many different narratives. And nowadays you see a lot of curators in major Western institutions go to hunt new art, new voices in the art fair, because they know that there are artists from India, from Bangladesh, from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, that you might not find them on the roster of museums in Europe or in the US. You need to look at new places, and I think we really need new paradigms. So I think it really takes a lot of people to do the work, but indeed, probably we really need to have principled mode of thinking about this, as you brilliantly put it, to not mix up, also to not confuse these words and these signifiers. I hope that what I'm saying answered a bit of your question, or tried to show my lack of answer.
No, I think that was great, and I will give obviously other people the chance, but I think also you pointed to a really important point, is that how are our archives? You said the stuff, the information you have access to, where are these archives? And now I'm left with one question, thinking, are we doing ourselves a disservice by just looking at the region from the point of view of the region? Do we need to do more of these juxtapositions with the West in order to be seen, which is a very problematic thing, but also very important. So thank you for that, Sam.
Thank you.
I'm left with a lot of interesting questions. Thank you.
I'm very grateful for your comments and your question. And I think, yes, I think also, as you mentioned, archives, I think it's very important to think also our region particularly, and I love it how Jean-Luc Godard mentions this regarding Palestine. Like, we particularly take and flip the notion of archive into something based on narrative, because sometimes the archive is frustrated, because we do not necessarily have the same intact archive in every region. We need to work with new tools to work with archive, with people who were displaced, with people who were, and Farideh was indeed, and she was in touch in Iran, in Gilan, with a lot of those people who had to run away, who were exiled, who couldn't go back to Iran before revolution, who couldn't go to Iran after revolution. A lot of, houses, a lot of those places that we might have access to, or we might not have access to, and we have to think about how we access the archive and how we make narrative around those issues. I have got my education merely in the West. I have studied in the West. Even my school in Tehran was a very, very Western school, and my education was very Western when it comes to thinking about these questions. Nonetheless, we should start, I think, thinking about juxtapositions that are meaningful in a careful manner, so that new history can emerge and new canons can be written down. And I think I must say also, the work of people like Lubaina Hamid, who had a major exhibition in Tate Modern. I became more familiar with her work thanks to Berlin Biennale that I had the honor of being a part of, curated by Gabin Kobo. Lubaina had worked for such a long time, and once you look at the legacy of the transatlantic slavery, you are talking about people who were completely displaced, and there is no way we can go back and to look at the archive probably the way that we could in Persia or in other parts of our region. But as I say, there are many different ways, and there are many different new steps being taken, and I'm just so grateful and so honored that I could be a little tiny contributor to this one particular artist who herself had thought a lot of these questions through. This was the other thing that Dyala and I were talking about, that Farideh knew very well how West worked, and institutions and art market and the role of artists, and she understood her role very well. And she almost, curating her work is so easy. Everything is prepared. She has a book, she has instructions, she has interviews, she has left all the flags and signifiers for us. You just need to go and find it,
And I think maybe a short answer as well, Nadine, to your question on, is it time we also positioned and located some of these histories in the West and not just within the region? And I think it's so interesting, Sam, that you were saying that a lot of your sort of journey and process as an artist was formed in the West, and that you needed to go back to Farideh's work, to thinking about modernisms from the region, also because you wanted to think about, as an artist, how to contextualize your own work in relation to where you're coming from. I think that's also really interesting, and it's work to be done for all of us in the region, making that possible for artists to contextualize their own work in relation to the people that we learn from. There's one question on that from Amy, who is a curator, I guess, who says, if she wanted to dive further into Farideh's work, you've talked a bit about her biography, her poetry and literature. I think you've touched on the amazing work she did translating works by Brecht, amongst others, and bringing them into Iran and disseminating them amongst as many people as possible, and that was an important part of her practice, is making literature accessible and translating it. Amy's asking if we're curators, where else can we go to discover more of her work and think about it? I don't know whether you have any pointers, maybe any seminal exhibitions you want to suggest for her, or I mean, I suppose the estate perhaps, but well, what ideas might you have for Amy, who's thinking as a curator about her work?
I really think that if you look her up, you can find quite a lot of material, but probably the best is indeed the estate of Farideh Lashai. If Manali is present, maybe, you know, I don't want to give her more work because I have already been demanding too much from her. But I think, yes, the exhibition in Del Prado, the exhibition in Kent, and the exhibition in Sharjah Art Foundation, as well as the TMOCA, I would say were very great entries for me. You know, I think UAE holds a lot of great works of Farideh. Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art, I'm not sure if they have it in English on their website, but the curated show by Ferial Jawahirian is a very seminal work of retrospective mode of work, looking at the work of Farideh. And the exhibition, and I would say the publication that was done for the Spark is You for the Parasol Unit Foundation has also a major section dedicated to the work of Farideh Lashai. So I would say these few that I know, but I'm sure that Manali might be able to say and introduce better resources than what I mentioned.
Well, I think that brings us to a close. Thank you so much, Sam, for this incredible talk. I can see lots of comments about how much everyone has enjoyed it.
I'm so wonderfully grateful. Thank you. I'm so grateful to you and your team and your time and you know, your introduction and making this possible. I was supposed to be in Abu Dhabi. I'm very grateful that you adapted the program to my last minute problems here in Berlin and Rotterdam. And I'm just grateful to Manali and everybody else who was in conversation with me, making this possible. It is really a great memory that I will carry within me for the coming years. Thanks a lot for having me with you.
Thank you, Sam, and please do look at the comments in the chat. There are lots of people saying thank you for your
unfortunately
insights.
can't access the chat, but if you would
well, I'll share some of them with you.
Yes,
afterwards.
please.
And I think Manali's still with us, so really an enormous thank you to Manali, who is really an inspiration for all of us. And thank you to everyone for your time today, for joining us on this journey of discovery. And please do visit the exhibition, those in the UAE, still on at the photography studio Minarata Saadiyat. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.